Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to Utility Sports. I'm really excited because the preseason AP Top 25 poll is here for college basketball. And I know some of you do not love the validity of the AP Top 25, and I don't necessarily either. I think the whole point of this series this year, as we go through the best teams in college basketball, we're going to look at the top 25 rather consistently and say, hey, did they get it right this week? What do I think about these teams? What can we see from them going into March Madness this year? I think that's what we're going to look at throughout the duration of this series. And we're just going to get to talk about some college basketball. So it's not necessarily about the AP Top 25 rankings themselves. It's about talking about the teams that we see in the AP Top 25 and what I really think about them. And let's get into it here. This is the preseason. First rankings come out, and these are actually leaked rankings from CBS Sports. It's not even on the AP Top 25 page yet. So that's how early we are at this right now. Literally, they came out 2 minutes ago from the time I started recording, gave the list a little quick one over, and I'm ready for it. So let's get into it here. Number 25, we got Texas Tech, the Red Raiders. And for me, they're a team that always plays better than the roster, the talent on paper. You would think how they would play. Texas Tech, they just consistently find ways to win. And I think Texas right now, the state itself, has become a really good breeding ground for good college basketball. You look at some of the teams in state there, TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech, the Longhorns. There is a lot of talent in that state when it comes to basketball. And the Texas Tech Red Raiders are a team that in their conference, obviously a little bit of a weaker conference when it comes to basketball. I think that Texas Tech can really shine. I think they're going to have a nice, good regular season. And they're the type of team when they get to March, they probably get to the round of 32 as a lock. You could see them maybe make some noise into the Sweet 16 or heck, maybe even the Elite 8, just with how things play out. 24, I'm really excited about this team. Dayton, the Flyers, a team that not a lot of people really know a lot about. I'm a Dayton Flyers fan myself, and usually that leads to the lack of bias here on the channel because typically we don't see Dayton here in the top 25 at all. They've only been ranked in the top 25 in the last 3-4 years at one time, and that was when Obi Toppin led them to the number 2 ranking in the entire nation. And I firmly believe they probably could have had a shot at winning the national championship that year had COVID not prematurely ended the season. The Dayton Flyers are back, and they belong here this time around. And you can trust me on this. A player you guys need to equate yourself with, Deron Holmes. He's a sophomore big man for the Dayton Flyers, and he started to really put things together toward the end of his freshman campaign. I'm very surprised to see Dayton on here. I really am, but they're a team that I believe deserves to be on here. I firmly do believe that. I think that they're going to play really well. Anthony Grant's one of the best coaches in the nation, in my opinion. He's someone who gets the most out of his players. You look back at certain guys throughout the program history. You look at, Jalen Crutcher. I think he got the most out of Obi Toppin in that role that he was using him in. Lightfoot. There's been a ton of examples of players playing better than they should with the University of Dayton since Anthony Grant's arrived. I really like his offensive style. He runs a ton of on-ball pick and roll, but he uses it in his normal sets. And I think it makes the job a lot easier for some of the guards that Dayton has. Typically, they find better forwards and big men than they do guards, which lends themselves to a little bit of trouble against ball pressure and creating shots on the perimeter, which is why his offense is so important there. And I think Dayton this year in the A-10, they're one of the stronger teams for sure. And they can really make a push this year and be way more competitive than most people think. I think that we're going to see them stay up in the top 25. Last year, St. Bonaventure was in the top 25. And I told people, don't believe that. They're not a top 25 team in the nation. And I believe within 2 weeks, they fell out of the AP top 25 and really didn't make a resurgence back onto that list. Dayton here, I do think is for real. Then we get into a couple Big Ten schools here, Illinois and Michigan. And I want to go highlight quick where they are in their recruiting classes. When you look at Illinois, 10 and Michigan, 11. So these two schools both got 4 4-stars, which is big time for those programs. And it's kind of surprising to me to see actually Illinois this close to Michigan, just given the fact that, hey, Illinois lost Kofi Cockburn. Andre Curbelo transferred out. They've lost some of their best players from this past season. Whereas Michigan, they have Hunter Dickinson returning. Obviously, they did lose Moussa Diabate to the draft. They've lost some other pieces on that team as well in Michigan. It's not like they're just bringing back the exact same team. And they struggled last year for a good majority of the year before the tournament started. But Illinois, to me, I'm a little bit more cautious on them just because I think they're going to be a little bit more reliant on some of those young guys, where Michigan still has Hunter Dickinson, the guy you're going to feed the ball to. He's the big man on campus, and he's the big man who's going to get the rock pretty much every single possession. And he's a good college player, someone who I think if he continues to play the way he's capable of, I expect him to have a very nice season. Oregon, 21. They got another big man coming into campus too, Khalil Ware. Let's go back over to the recruiting ranks here, and you see Oregon not very high, but they did get a 5-star player. So again, we don't really see Oregon on this list, but I think that they belong here. They only have 3 commits, but one of them was a 5-star and a top 15 recruit in the class in Khalil Ware. And I think he's going to be a big time for them. Oregon, that's their staple, right? They always bring in one guy who's top of the pack when it comes to college rankings. And he's going to do something there that I think is going to be really important for his draft stock. I think he's going to be a near lottery pick. Khalil Ware will be. And I think Oregon, I'm a little shaky on them if they're going to stick around here, but Oregon's one of those teams that's feisty, always tends to stick around. So I could see that happening again this year. And when we look at number 20, Alabama, they are a team that had a very good recruiting class. And if you don't believe me, well, here they are ranked 3rd in the nation, 2 5-stars, one of them being Brandon Miller, 2 4-stars, and a 3-star. You look at their average grade here, 96.06. So they did phenomenal when it comes to bringing in talent this year in the recruiting class. And I think Alabama, again, they've had some ups and downs. Last year was a big down for them. They just didn't get the production from their guards that they were hoping to. Obviously, they brought in an exciting 5-star last year, and he just didn't perform at the level that myself and others thought he could have. So now I think this year they've got more length, they've got more size. They're not going to be running such an undersized lineup, and I think that's going to be pretty big for them. San Diego State, a school that, again, with their competition, they just tend to stick around here. San Diego State does a very good job just going out, winning games. They're a team that usually doesn't get a lot of love before the season starts, so I'm surprised to see them in the top 25 here in the preseason. But the Aztecs have a very good team. They're a good program, and I really do think that they belong here in the top 20 at this point. Virginia as well. You can only say so much about Virginia because when it comes to March Madness, they tend to leave it a little to be desired, in my opinion. There's, you think back to the times of Justin Anderson and Malcolm Brogdon. They just didn't go anywhere when they were the number 1 team in the nation, number 2 team in the nation. But one thing that they have been is very consistent over the last decade. They are consistently a very good team, and they're a team that typically when they are running through the regular season, you're going to see the most scores of, hey, it's 23-17 at halftime, which is not the most entertaining basketball to watch unless you really like the X's and O's like myself, where it's really fun to watch Virginia and find ways that, hey, with their aggressive perimeter defense and good shell defense system that they run there, they're going to limit a lot of shots. And I think Virginia, again, in the ACC, a school that probably does belong in the top 25, just given where they were at. Arizona, interestingly enough, I find them in a very similar situation to Illinois here. They did not have the recruiting class Illinois did, though. They just did not bring in as much talent. So to see them at 17 is a little surprising. They lost their leading scorer from last year in Benedict Mathurin. They lost their leading rebounder in Christian Koloko. Now they still do have Kirk Kriisa. They also have Azuolas Tubelis, who I think a lot of people expect to take a step forward, and I'm sure he can. He's someone who I think he would be a 2nd-round draft pick hopeful, and if he has a really nice season this year for the Wildcats, I could see that playing out. Villanova. Now, this is a team I really like here at 16, and I think it really comes with Cam Whitmore and how important he is to that program. He was their biggest get this offseason, and somebody who we saw him play for a USA Select team this summer, won MVP for that team, and was just phenomenal. He's one of the most athletic players in the country right now, and I think he's going to really show out this year for Villanova. I would be surprised if he doesn't average anywhere from 14 to 17 points a game on efficient scoring. Now, I think his shooting needs to have an uptick yet, but in the half court, he's so athletic. He can get to his spots and he can finish over people. That's really what you're looking for, and it's going to be very important for that team. Now, 2 teams here in TCU and Auburn that I really want to go look at where they're at in the actual recruiting classes here. You see Virginia there was 13th as well with 4 4-stars. Again, very good recruiting class for them. Villanova, there's the 1 5-star there with Cam Whitmore and 2 4-stars. But when you're looking at Auburn here, they got Yohan Traore, who's a good big man for them. I think he's going to be someone that they rely on. You see only 3 commits, but very high quality commits. An average 97.01 grade. Definitely really good for them. That's part of why they're up here, right? They get a really nice recruit, and I think they're a team that can compete this year. And then when we look for the counterpart here in TCU, this is a team that, again, there's not a ton of recruits going there every single year. But the one thing I know about TCU, they play above the expectations. And it seems like the expectations are actually kind of lofty this year. I'm not sure if they're a top 15 team in the nation. To be honest, I prefer Villanova over them. I slightly prefer Auburn over them. I think that Virginia throughout the regular season probably plays better. And I wouldn't be surprised if, say, Michigan and Dayton also pass them and catch up to them at least. TCU, again, based on roster, not in love with it. You're really looking at Miles McBride being the player that you're betting on here. He was awesome for Team USA U19 a couple summers ago, back when he played with Chet Holmgren, Jaden Ivey, that group of players that won gold against France, beating Victor Wembanyama. And Miles McBride was an important player there for sure. But excuse if I'm saying Miles McBride, Mike Miles, excuse me, wrong name. But I think he's going to be an important player for them for sure for the Horned Frogs. Again, I think he's going to have a nice sophomore season. Didn't play as well last year as I kind of expected him to, but I think he can probably get back on track. I see them kind of hovering around this 20 range when we get through the season. I'm not sure if they're top 15, like I said. Then we have Indiana here with Texas and Tennessee. And these three programs are a lot of fun to talk about. Indiana, well, they got some Montverde kids. They got Jalen Hood-Schifino. They got Malik Renew. Right now, they've been a team that they've gotten a way better when it comes to recruiting. And being back in the top 15 is big for them. The Hoosiers are a historic program and one that I think just it feels right having them in the top 15 here. Just they added a lot of talent this year. They really did. And I think that if those guys play as well as I think they can, Schifino, Renew, both guys who can play with the ball in their hands a bit, play make for others to a certain extent, I think the Hoosiers can have a pretty nice year. Texas, I'm really excited about. Got some really talented players in the recruiting class. Again, let's go back and look at where Texas is. 6th, 2 5-stars, a 4-star, and a 3-star. That 3-star probably not going to have as much of an impact in year one of his, college career, but those 5-stars will. And they also got some really, really good transfers. You look at a guy like Tyrese Hunter, one probably was the best transfer out in the market this offseason. Texas, the Longhorns, they're going to be good this year. I do believe in them. Last year, I believed in them. It hurt me. They didn't play as well as I thought they could have. Some guys, Marcus Carr didn't play as well as I thought he could have. And I was just kind of a little perplexed on why they didn't perform as well as I thought they should have based on their roster. I don't expect back-to-back years of that, though. I think Texas will play well. And Tennessee, just another example here, SEC school, just plays really well, really competitively. They've built a very nice basketball program there. You see a lot of guys in the NBA like Grant Williams come out of that program. They've produced a lot of NBA talent, but it's really because of the product of the coaching there. They build good team defense. They have good individual on-ball defenders. They typically have good size. And I think Tennessee, the Volunteers, they're going to be good this year as well. Arkansas at 10 is surprising to me. Let's go back and look at them. Number 2 in the country when it comes to the recruiting class with 3 5-stars and 3 4-stars. This is a loaded roster, and Muss has done a great job building this thing up. The Razorbacks are one of the best teams in the nation, in my opinion. I'm surprised to see them as low as 10. I think Nick Smith Jr. is going to get off the ground running. Anthony Black, I think, is a perfect 2 in college basketball right now because he's lengthy. He's going to be disruptive. He's going to get in the passing lanes. And when you look at Arkansas as well, they added another athlete in Jordan Walsh. So their top 3 guys, I think, all fit together, which is part of the reason why I'm higher on them than this ranking is. And I really do believe that the Razorbacks are going to have a nice season. Creighton here as well, I believe that they're going to have a good season. They got Baylor Shireman from SDSU. That was a very good pickup for them. And I think a player on their roster that's really ready to take a step forward, and we saw it in March Madness last year, Arthur Kaluma. I really like this player as a draft prospect. I think he's someone who's going to continue to get better as he ages and progresses. But Creighton themselves, I think they're going to start to lean into him a little bit more. And also having a Baylor Shireman type, I think, is something they were missing last year. Another ball handler, someone who can also knock down the 3-ball when given space. Creighton's going to be dangerous this year. Now, it typically doesn't lend itself to a lot of great March Madness play, kind of like what we talked about earlier with Virginia. They just leave a little to be desired when it comes to March. But I think throughout the year, they're going to be a very good team, and I think they're going to win a ton of games. UCLA at 8, they're a team that's pretty interesting, right? They lose Johnny Juzang, who has been their leading scorer, but they also now add in Amari Bailey, who is one of the better recruits in the class, especially at the point guard position. And he's actually the reason that Dior Johnson decided to not go to UCLA because he basically lost the starting job the moment Amari Bailey committed. So UCLA, they've got moving pieces here. I was surprised Peyton Watson left for the draft last year. Ended up being a first-round pick, which I don't think anyone expected really because, well, he played terribly for the Bruins last year. Ultimately, UCLA is going to be right in the thick of things here. Good coaching, good talent, nice recruiting class. They're going to be good. Duke at 7 is really shocking to me. They have the number 1 recruiting class in the country. You look at it, 4 5-stars, 2 4-stars, and a 3-star with an average 98.31 grade. It's just unheralded how well of a recruiting class they had here. And you look at the talent that they actually legitimately brought in with some of the talent that they kept there. Jeremy Roach is still in, but then they add in 7 commits and 4 of them being 5-stars. You know, Derek Lively, I think, is a perfect athletic college big man, especially to be paired with Kyle Filipowski. Those two guys are a perfect 4-5 pairing together. Dariq Whitehead was the best high school player in the nation last year. He received the National Player of the Year award, and they added him in as well. He's one of the best shooters in the recruiting class. I'm surprised Duke isn't higher. Obviously no Coach K anymore. Maybe that lends itself to them being a little bit lower than normal, but I think that this team is going to be really good. They got all the recruits. They have all the talent. And as long as the coaching follows suit and what I'm expecting here, I think the Blue Devils can be dangerous. Now we have a tie for 5 here between Kansas and Baylor, 2 teams that have historically been really good. Bill Self is probably one of the best coaches of all time when it comes to college basketball. You look at his regular season win percentage. He's been dominant in the Big 12. And Baylor, they've been really the team that has ascended, I think, the most in the last 15 years. Just looking at what Scott Drew's really done for that program, they are such a good young team, and they added Keontae George, who I think is going to be one of the best young players in the nation as well. Incoming freshman, he's going to be a nice shot creator for them, but he's also going to run their offense, which I think is huge and something they were missing a little bit last year. Obviously, they had a bevy of guards, but I don't think that they had a true lead guard, whereas Keontae George for me is going to be that guy this year. So I do like their current outlook and their makeup on this roster. I think these 2 teams here in the top 5, I think that they did get this relatively right. I would have preferred Duke over both of them still, just based on the actual on paper talent. But again, there's something to be said about consistency, and Baylor has that. Kansas doesn't have that as much anymore because they did lose, obviously, a couple of players to the draft in Ochai Agbaji. They also lost Christian Brown. So 2 of their best players are gone. So Kansas has some things to figure out, but they had a good recruiting class themselves. Then Kentucky at 4, Houston at 3, Gonzaga at 2, and North Carolina at 1. Let's talk about these top 4 here. Will these be the 4 we see in the Final Four? Absolutely not. I do like Houston here. Jarris Walker, they added him, and they didn't lose really any of their top players. Marcus Sasser is still there. Houston's going to be good. Houston's going to be a problem this year. I think that them in the top 3 does make a lot of sense. Gonzaga, putting them at 2, kind of a cakewalk rollover. Like, hey, they still have Drew Timme and they play nobody all year long. Yeah, they're going to be good. So I don't really have an issue with Gonzaga here at 2. Do I think they're the second best team in the nation? Definitely not. I think if they played Duke, if they played UCLA, Baylor, Kansas, heck, even if they played Dayton, I think they would have some issues, honestly. Not that Dayton would beat them necessarily, but I think it would be a competitive game because I think Dayron Holmes does a lot of the things that Drew Timme doesn't do from an athletic standpoint. So I think the 2 of them battling would actually be very interesting. Kentucky at 4 here feels right to me. You know, Kason Wallace is there. They've got the pieces in place, and typically they win games. The one I'm really not a fan of, though, and this reeks of UCLA last year to me, UNC at 1. The Tar Heels are not the best team in the nation. I know they returned the most players. I know they made it to the college championship game in April. Obviously, March Madness extends into April. Very good naming there from the NCAA. But at the end of the day, North Carolina, I just don't buy it. I really don't. You know, think about UCLA. The year before they came in, they were a team that barely made it into the March Madness bracket, right? They were one of the last 4 in, essentially, and they had to play for a game in. They got in. I think they were too low ranked for sure. They were like 13th or something. They should have been a top 8 ranking. But look at UNC. They were ranked 8th. And yes, they played really well in March. That's 6 games. They played 6 really good high leverage games, and they've got, you know, the seniority on that team. They're older. So was UCLA, and they just didn't follow it up with the season that everyone was expecting. And I think North Carolina here is too high ranked. I don't think the Tar Heels are the number one team in the nation. I think they belong in this top 10 conversation. But if you're looking at it from a roster standpoint, I do prefer an Arkansas. I do prefer a Duke. And if these teams were older, I think they would be locks to be ahead of UNC. Now, obviously, those two programs specifically are going to rely on a lot of freshman talent in Nick Smith and Dariq Whitehead and obviously Anthony Black and Derek Lively. There's a lot of talent between those two programs that UNC, in my opinion, does not have. But they do have the seniority. Obviously, they lost Brady Manick. He's now playing in the NBL out in Australia. But at the end of the day, the Tar Heels, I think losing Manick hurts, but I just think ultimately they're not going to live up to what they did last year. They're just not going to. You typically don't see that. Teams aren't going to make a run like that in back-to-back years. Most people had UNC losing in round one of the tournament last year. And to be frank, it was because they weren't good in the regular season. They really weren't. They struggled in pretty much every regard during the regular season. I mean, if you want to go back and look at their record, you can. This team wasn't good in the regular season, and I don't think that they're going to be great in the regular season this year. They're definitely going to be better than they were last year in the regular season. I do think they figured some things out toward the end of the year. Obviously, newer young coach. I think that he needed to learn some things throughout the year, and he did. And they've got a good backcourt, and Baycott's a rebounding machine. So they have some of the pieces you're looking for to be a good college basketball team. I just don't think they're the best team in the nation. For me, honestly, I think right now, if I had to rank them, I think Houston would be my one, to be honest with you. I think Houston's probably got the best roster, and I think they're going to have a really easy schedule compared to some of these other schools, which is going to make them very likely to be, maybe start the year 8-0, 9-0 or something. And I think if the Cougars do that, they're going to be a team that a few weeks into the season, we're going to say, yeah, this is the number one team in the nation right now. And it's going to be pretty widely accepted. I'm excited to see, Baylor. I want to see Kansas, how they look, but I think this is a really good year for college basketball. Hopefully you guys did enjoy today's video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and also subscribe to the channel for more. Let me know if you think the AP Top 25 poll got it right here. And thanks guys so much for watching. We'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.